Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a very rainy day in London, although this is audio, so you can't see the rain, with Jonathan Corry on another episode of The Precursive Perspective. I'm delighted to be joined today by, as we say in the UK, my old mucker, the legend that is James Brown. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thanks, Jonathan. Very good today.
Yeah, good. Good to see you. So you're in the London office?
Yep, in London today, enjoying the humidity and the rain, just like you. Yeah.
Well, it's great to have you on. I'm really excited about this one. Obviously, you and I have known each other a number of years now. So give us a little bit of background to yourself and about your career and what you do currently, if you don't mind, to kick us off.
Yeah, sure. So I'm James Brown, senior partner here at Simon Kucher. We're a growth consultancy, so strategy consultancy, helping our clients on a huge range of different growth topics. My own career, my own background, I've been in consulting now for about 15 years. Prior to that, I did 10 years in a real job. Actually, yeah, large IT hardware and service business where I started off in the early 2000s or just late 1990s, working in an analytical role and kind of gradually progressed into commercial strategy, and then really got the bug for pricing. So I was helping set up pricing teams, develop global pricing strategies, did a couple of things in that space, and then got picked up by Simon Kucher, who was leading pricing consultancy. We do a lot more than just pricing, but when I got picked up, that was the thing that caught my attention. And
you were at Reckitt, right? You're doing pricing.
No, I was at Ricoh, close. Ricoh, printers, copiers, etc. Was the 8th largest IT company in the world when I was there back in the early 2000s, but it's been surpassed somewhat since. Yeah.
Well, it's a good place to start with pricing, right? Because it's kind of it can be highly commoditized, that space. So you've got to be imaginative and creative in your pricing strategies for both hardware and services. So now I can see how that would have been a good learning ground. So I mean, look, when I think we got to know each other probably like 5-6 years ago, right? And I guess I just to begin with, I always love to get people's perspective on how they've seen the world of consulting evolve. So what's your take on where we are now? How have things evolved over the last years, and how do you see the current environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. It depends what part of consulting you're in. So if I focus on the area I know best, strategy consulting and advisory, the big thing I think has changed is projects are less defined than they used to be. They used to be very, even a few years ago when I started in the space, it's very much, this is the project kickoff, this is the end. You come in, you do your project, you deliver your report, you finish. I think those days have long gone, and they've moved on quite quickly. The expectation from clients is far more a long-term relationship, a far more focus on implementing and making ideas realized. So bringing things to life. And that might mean there's a core traditional project stuck in the middle of it, but around that, there's far more collaborative working sessions. There's joint developing things. It's not take some data, take some interviews, go off, do some research, come back with a big bang answer. It's work through it together, come up with something that really works and comes to life with the client. And that's I guess there's been a lot of other changes as well in the way these projects are done, the way things are delivered. But that, I think, is at the heart of it. Yeah.
And is that partly because just the pace of change for your clients and the industries that they serve has accelerated so much that this idea, like this need for like more of an always on consumption based advice and guidance has grown? Is it what's the driver on the client side, really?
I think you're right. The pace of change, the types of questions people are grappling with. I mean, if you really break it down, the consultancy has been helping their clients tackle really big and difficult questions for decades. That hasn't changed. Probably what has changed is some of the uncertainty, the volatility that our clients are facing, the things that they're trying to grapple with, also the amount of data and information that's available. Organizations, consulting organizations used to be able to, they just had access to lots of information, data, reports, big libraries. you can go off and find that stuff in 2 minutes with a smart Google search these days. But it's about, the data and the information that comes through, live data, live insight, changing, reacting quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And when you think about like the business model for consultancy, like how would you articulate, like right now, what's like the anatomy of the modern consultancy? What are those core pillars that are making you guys successful, or that indeed, your peers are successful because of?
I think the actual anatomy of the consulting business hasn't really changed very much. And that's quite interesting. That it raises some questions around how business is changing, how we're working together with our clients, how we're charging our clients, putting my sort of pricing hat on, and the model itself of a world-class consultancy. The fundamental element is you're still selling people's time, backed by a large pool of intellectual capital that's been generated by the consultancy over years. You're packaging that up and delivering it through people's time, through very smart people that you're hiring, training, the traditional model, bring them in as graduates, train them through, an awful lot more now taking on people further on in their careers, bringing in expertise. But ultimately, you're taking the intellectual capital you've developed as a consulting firm and then sending that out via your very smart consultants to go and solve problems for your clients and deliver solutions. Now, that fundamentally hasn't changed. What is beginning to change is people are starting to look at, okay, really is this, how do I deliver this in a more sustainable way that doesn't need to have the same amount of people behind it all the time? And this is common across all professional service firms. So one of the areas that I work on for Simon Kucher, one of my practice areas, is I advise professional service clients. That's law firms, accountants, marketing agencies, other consultancies on the commercial models that they use. And one thing that a lot are looking at, how to break the link between revenue growth and headcount growth. Do you always need to have more people to get more revenue? Or are there other things that you can bring into the mix? Can you offer technology solutions? Can you offer data and subscriptions to data? What else can you bring that has a different commercial model and a different way of delivering and ensuring success for your client as well?
Awesome. Love it. I love that. Get off the revenue treadmill, right? Where if it's driven by bodies, and that I would imagine, you and I have always talked about some of those synergies between, what's happening in software businesses. And for example, we work with embedded services teams within those organizations, and what are some of the convergence between that world of SaaS and consultancy? And I'm curious, I'm guessing then that the SaaS business model in a way has inspired some of this thinking as to disrupting this linkage between headcount and revenue growth. How has that SaaS world informed or influenced the world of consultancy?
I'm not as sure that it's the SaaS world itself. I think the idea that a recurrent revenue stream is the key thing. And the two things, it's often delivered through a SaaS type model. But what's probably inspired things is if you think about a lot of consulting businesses, or broader professional services businesses, they go in, they do their piece of work, they bill for their time, or they estimate the amount that the project will cost, and then they bill for that. And it's linked to, okay, how much return on investment are we going to deliver for this client? How can we decide how we're going to price accordingly? But it's quite limited in many ways. And what most firms have started doing, I think nearly all major consulting firms have a division, an arm, which develops software solutions. So we have a fantastic team, the Simon Kucher Engine team, who take the work that we do and build sophisticated tools that we can then deliver to our clients to help them work with we might come up with the new strategy that our client needs to deliver. We might help them with the processes, help them think about how they're going to do it. but then actually they need something that they can get their hands on, a tool to help them with that. And we will either help them find the right partner to develop something for them, buy something off the shelf, or help build something ourselves. And most of the major consultants have a division or an arm that looks something like that as well. And one of the challenges with a lot of professional services businesses is because you don't have that recurrent revenue each year or each month. It's annual rather than a monthly sort of selling cycle, but you come in and go, right, okay, this year, how am I going to serve my different clients? If you're in if you have long-term transformational change programs, you might have a multi-year consulting project. Typically for strategy consulting projects, they're probably, I don't have a stat on this, but I would say something like a 3-month project is fairly normal. So each year you have to go and find more and more 3-month projects. Now, of course, we all as firms have large key accounts that we keep going back to and who like working with us, that we deliver value to, so you find new things that you can do together. And ultimately, it's still going out and each year trying to find more and more of these 3-month projects. Whereas actually, if you can deliver something and leave it behind in terms of producing that recurrent revenue, it does change the model for both parties.
Interesting. I mean, I think the world is littered though with consulting businesses that try to become product companies. So you have to, like, the timing and the choreography of that can be tricky, right?
And certainly in my network, I don't know anyone who would want to shift too far into that as well. You want it to be a complementary revenue stream. But actually, if you're a consultancy, you are selling your advice.
I mean, I worked at CEB, who you might remember. They got purchased by Gartner, and I remember the transition, the digitalization for us was when we used to sell the IP, which was research, right, member-based research. It was books. Like when we started, we had a big library in the office, not too far from your office, and then the transition was digitalizing that, and then a portal. And then the various consumption methods could grow from there, but that took quite a lot of time. And I think at the time, a lot of people felt that it was a bit slow, the transition that we made. But I think in reality, some companies would have said, well, let's become a product company and create a platform and then try to sell this SaaS solution, and the wheels can come off quite rapidly. I think the point that I'm taking really, or the insight that I'm taking is really, through this evolution, is as a consultancy leader or PS leader, if you can think about how you can make your IP more accessible and can generate revenue from it in different ways than a traditional project, that's a step in the right direction. So sort of turning to now an area of passion for you and expertise, so pricing. Very keen to hear, like, what are some of the key trends that you're seeing into how other services organizations are pricing these days? What are some of the things that are out there and that you're seeing?
And this is something that is changing quite rapidly, or I should say a lot of firms are trying to change it quite rapidly. It's a slow industry to move. If I take something like law, the people have talked in the legal about the death of the billable hour. I mean, when I first started looking at that, which would have been back in 2009, I was finding material that was 10 years old at that point, talking about the death of the billable hour is here. When I get a bill from our lawyers at Simon Kucher, or personally, it's all by the hour. Everything is people do estimate and fixed fees and cap fees, but it's not quite dead at all. Same with accountants. Consultants don't tend to, or strategy consultants don't tend to be hourly. We're more likely to have a weekly running rate if it's an indeterminate length, or generally a fixed fee if it's a fixed term project. But still, the principles are there. Now, my favorite example was with someone I was talking with, had the financial services work that they were doing, the accounting world effectively. They'd transform some data. They did 2 weeks every year for several of their clients. It used to take 2 weeks of a senior associate's time. Then they found a way to get it done in 6 minutes. They automated. Now, brilliant. They've automated the process. It takes it's less drudge work for their senior associate. It's faster for the client, and in theory, although I can't vouch for it, probably more reliable as well. The trouble is, they were on time and material models for all of their clients taking this. So ethically and contractually, they couldn't build them. Now, that's probably the most extreme example I've seen of someone finding a solution which should, in theory, add a huge amount of value, but completely breaks the commercial model that they had. Because suddenly and that's probably the most accessible example I have, but there's lots and lots of other examples like that all around the world of law, consulting, etc. You're at a consulting firm and you suddenly find a way to automate your analytics, take 2 weeks of the analysis out of your turn that into 1 or 2 days with some standard tools. What an awful lot of people in the space will still do is reduce their total fee. Now, that's fine in terms of that's the way it'll go eventually, because you reduce the amount of effort and the cost involved, and gradually over time the prices will come down. And that's always happened. If you got faster doing things with Excel than people used to be using Lotus 123 and so on. And things gradually evolve. But if you suddenly do it, you give all the value away instantly. What about all the time and effort you spent in building those tools in the first place? How do you charge for that? Or other things, add-ins that might make it easier to produce your charts. Very small, simple example that suddenly takes a few hours off here or there. Most consulting firms have a more fixed fee model, or most strategy consultants have a more fixed fee model, so they're slightly insulated from that, apart from the estimating process. But a lot of law firms, marketing agencies, others, they're still very much will charge you for exactly how much time we've done. And the way we like to think about it is there's different tools you can have. There's tools that you develop in-house, also tools that you develop for yourself to make your own processes more effective and faster. And some of those tools are also those that you can sell to your client. And then there's this spectrum. You could take some of them and say, here you are, my client, you can buy this directly and do some of this yourself. So I'll directly charge you for it. Others are things that are in the background. They might make your data formatting easier. They might help you access your own information faster. They might use generative AI to sort of develop drafts for you. All sorts of things that can be done that are internal tools as well, which you don't charge your client for directly, but you have to find a way to monetize. And this is the struggle that a lot of firms are going through right now, and it's happening very fast. Obviously, generative AI is the buzzword that is keeping people awake at the moment, because they're going, okay, actually, if we suddenly strip a load of time out of our internal processes, make things faster. If you're in a marketing firm who can have the first draft written for you in half the time that a human would take to do it, probably a lot less than half the time a human would take to do it, and then you spend the time polishing it and finishing it, how do you charge for it? What's the agreement with your client? You're still delivering the same value to them, but you have to find a way to charge. So that's disrupting the way people are thinking about pricing.
Okay. And so this kind of monetization paradox, if you will, what are people doing about that then? So if we take that example, right, take the example of the automation where you've got a senior consultant, he's no longer doing the 2 weeks worth of work. Well, if you're charging $1,000 a day, that's 10K's worth of time that you're billing for. So what are people moving to? Are they looking at more outcomes-based pricing, more value-based pricing? Is that the name for this? I guess the solution, if you will, to this? Tell us.
Value-based pricing would be the solution. But then the question is, how do you quantify the value? And that's one of the hardest ones to go about. How do you quantify the value? How do you decide what it was worth? Now, what you do know, of course, is what someone was paying for it before. They were paying, in that particular example, £10,000. So can you say to them, right, we're going to turn that into a product and charge you £10,000 for every time we do it? Or you could actually say, well, we're going to charge you £5,000 for it now, and we'll give you a share of the benefits, but we will also take a share of the benefits ourselves. So there's turning it into using some kind of reference of what you've done in the past. Really, it all comes down to the understanding the value that you deliver to your client. Is there a way that you can link it to outcomes?
Yeah.
Now, outcomes-based pricing, certainly during the pandemic and volatility and high inflation we've seen over the last year, has taken a little bit of a beating. Yep. Because there's been a lot of cases where clients and their suppliers, the consulting suppliers, have looked at this and gone, the outcome was completely different to what we were expecting, sometimes more positive, sometimes more negative, but due to the fault of neither party, just because the environment has changed completely. Some outcomes-based agreements that I'm aware of got torn up by mutual consent. Because someone realized that either the consultant or the client was going to be far better off than they should be. But outcomes-based pricing is still, it's a method that many people are looking towards. Having a product or moving to some form of fixed fee that it captures everything. Then, frankly, if you're a client, if you're buying a solution from me as a consultant, do you really care how I build that in the background? If I find a way to save 20% of my time whilst I'm building it, does that really matter? But then actually you're sitting there as a client going, well, yeah, it does, because I'm paying you because I think your time is worth this much. So people have different ideas about what they think they're paying for. Some people think they are paying for time. Some people think they're paying for a solution.
It's super interesting because I guess this means that then it moves a certain amount of complexity into you need a certain amount of sophistication with regards to how you scope it, how you contract it, your SOW, defining those outcomes. That almost in a way is a new set of skills for the firm. Okay.
It is. And I was talking to a partner in another firm fairly recently about, about 2 or 3 different firms in different conversations recently. About the way that they do things, and I say it hasn't really changed. 10, 15, 20 years. They're doing it the same way. And often it's when you come to scoping and pricing, that's where a partner or a senior member of the team steps in to do that final piece, and they don't necessarily know how to do it a different way.
Yeah, fascinating. It reminds me of, we have a customer in the telephony tech space, right? And they were showing me a dashboard, and in that dashboard there was this big multi-million-dollar number, let's say. And I said, oh, what's that number? And they said, oh, don't worry about that. And we were going through all these different metrics, things like their utilization and their delivery time and things like this. And these things had been improving. They had had a lot of challenges in how they would do their delivery due to a global labor force, a lack of visibility, inconsistent project delivery. And then that tied in a lot with their supply chain because they had a lot of infrastructure and shipping and all of these types of things. And they were just able to tighten this up and improve their delivery time. And so this dashboard was kind of monitoring that. And I said, no, what's that number? And they said, oh, we're not going to tell you that because you'll charge us more. Right. And these are good guys. I mean, a number of these people are friends of mine now. And it was the amount of lost revenue that they were recouping, because with their particular model, when they commenced the service with their customer, that's when they started making money on the contract. So the gap between closing a deal and that service commencement was pretty significant, and it was a very large number. And I remember at the time saying, imagine if we'd done some outcomes-based pricing on this one, guys, like the contract would be worth significantly more. So I think it's a super fascinating topic. You got to be quite you got to have some cojones, should we say, to go with that. Very interesting. You
got to have data as well. That's the other thing, that if you can measure your outcomes, and prove what you've done, then that's brilliant. Then you can have a basis for, but you can also have historical data on how long it's taken you to do certain tasks, how and the outcomes that's delivered. And interestingly, if we take law firms, that the timesheet data they collect, effectively millions of records, 6-minute intervals of what people have been doing, and some of the machine learning techniques being applied to that to really pick apart patterns and help people understand, okay, how long does this take? For a typical case like this, how long would we spend on it? what kind of outcomes do we expect to get? Yeah.
Yeah. Is that where you see the role of automation sort of influencing these consultancies in like people really need to get their act together in maybe the automation or the measurement to begin with of that almost like day zero, right? In order to monetize some of this innovation. Is that how that will play a role?
I think it's probably less about that they need to track their time and effort to understand what they're doing and how that's changing. If you're charging based on time, then you need to understand how that time is being spent, but you also need to understand how it's changing. But actually, that time you spend on it doesn't change the value that you deliver for the client. So the ultimate app. So you need the data, you need to understand what you're doing in order to think about how you run the rest of your business and how you change your commercial models. You don't actually need it for value-based pricing. You need it for understanding your profitability, I think, really.
Yeah, no, I guess what I was getting at was like the assessment piece. So if we're saying that we want to move towards more of an outcomes orientated or value-based pricing approach, right? And we want to think about more innovative ways to monetize. My assumption is that some of these consultancies need to develop better methods to do assessments of current state of clients and have better tooling for that to do it at scale, right? Because otherwise the level of effort to like sort of pull it out of someone. Because I think what's interesting with some of the process mining technologies now that I'm seeing is like people using process mining technologies to do that initial calculation to be like, this is what this is actually costing you. We do a version of that ourselves with clients. It is, and that's where I see AI playing a role. And then you can say, this is current state much more quickly than maybe we've got to spin up a 3-month project to do that.
Yes. No, I fully agree. Yeah. The better a baseline you can get at the beginning, whether that's of a process cost, whether it's of a revenue basis that they're getting, whatever you're going to measure success against. So for us, we're helping them grow their revenues, their profitability. So we need to understand, what exactly are they getting right now? What are they getting it for? And how are we going to then think about how we're going to change that? If it's cost of a process, so if your solution or your consulting service helps them reduce the cost of a process, or the cost of delivery, then yes, you need to understand exactly how much time and effort they're spending on that right now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, listen, to pivot into another topic that, I remember all those years ago, you were espousing to me the war for talent in the UK strategy consulting market. Actually, probably in an office, not, you've got the big boys office now though, but in one of the other ones where I came in as a guest, you and Mark, and I think I'm really interested in, because I know that you built a very, very high performing team, well-regarded team in the market. And I'm curious to know kind of how you think about that talent acquisition, attracting talent and retaining talent. What are some of the things that you think the best companies do, or that you tend to advocate?
Yeah, I think it's the $1 million question. If you could really get this right, because people are at the absolute heart of consulting business, if you could really nail this down, then you've won in the consulting game. There are certain things that everyone wants to be. The consultants are there as they are employees who you will get to work for you on projects to take your intellectual capital and help clients solve problems. Great. But actually, you need to really look at it from that employee's perspective. They are a consultant, they're part of the bigger team. These are classic things, but I think they can get overlooked, especially if you're growing fast, you're pulling people in, you're quickly recruiting people to scale up when you have successful projects. It's easy to look at them just as resources. And I've seen a number of firms that have made that mistake. You look at them as resources and they have these pyramids of, right, we'll hire this many people, next year we'll be down to that, then next year we'll whittle it down further. Turning people on and off. I like to think of it in terms of, okay, you're helping a consultant forge a career path in consulting for the first few years, potentially into a completely different industry afterwards, but ideally in consulting and with you. What you're looking for is those people that will do the distance with you, make it through to partner level position. But you also have to accept that a lot of people don't want to do that, and you need diversity of thought, of career objectives, of paths coming in to get the right mix. You want those people who they'd really like to work hard for 2 or 3 years, learn as much as they can about the industry and the sector, and then move on. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a problem. They're part of the mix of the consulting group. So you really need to think of it in terms of, okay, what's the career path that people are going to want to take, and how do we help them take it? And this isn't revolutionary HR or talent management thinking, but I don't think the consulting industry on the whole has been brilliant at this. Some of the things that we've done, we've invested a lot of time and effort in our career management systems and tools. So really been looking at trying to pull everything together. How do you, because when you're staffing up a project, you need to think about, okay, what does the client need? And want? What type of team does the client need and want? What skill sets do I need in my project team to make this project work well? Who works well with each other? What are the career goals and objectives? So for the partner or the senior director, whoever it is that's running the project, they probably want someone who's done that task 5 to 6 times before. For the individual, they don't want to do the same task 5, 6 times. They want to do it a few times so they know how to do it. Then they want to do something different and stretch themselves. But then the other thing that often outweighs all of that is who's available right now. Who's actually free in this window of time to do this project? And that ends up trumping all these other things. We don't spend enough time focusing on, okay, how do I match up client required skills, availability, and consultant interests and learning needs? If you don't get all of those right, you end up with dissatisfaction somewhere.
I think that having a little bit more of I think I see from a number of firms having a little bit more of a challenger mentality when it comes to that engagement with the client around the team and the start time and these slots, right? Because being confident to say to a prospective client or an existing client, look, I've got someone here, they're great. They haven't worked in an automotive project 10 times. They've done it once, but they're really good. Right. And they're going to bring that energy to this engagement is something that very few would be willing, I think, to say or do, because traditionally that's not the way that it's been done. But I think you're absolutely right. It's that inside out view of it's not resource management, it's talent management. Right. But I think you highlight a point, which is just the romance and the reality of it from career development perspective is like, just the organized chaos sometimes of the inflow of work and moving schedules and things like that. It's difficult to achieve, right? But it feels like the North Star is there for you, right? That's at the back of your mind as you grow your practice and your business. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. We want to, and we've done a number of other things as well. So really over the last few years, really professionalize some of the different functions within the team as well. So actually all of our project managers have, and every single project manager in our UK team has a periodic check-in with our HR team, very experienced, strong background in professional services, HR management, who doesn't just talk about the team, but also how to manage the individuals on the team, what things are coming up. So not how are the projects going, but who's under pressure, who's not under pressure, who's performing well, who's not. How do you have those difficult conversations? And so our HR team are coaching our project managers on a very regular basis and drawing it out. So it's not me as a partner sitting there going, okay, well, you need to have a tough conversation with your team member. It's them going to someone else saying, well, look, the team's working, but I need to know how to get them to improve their performance. Identifying the problems early, but also identifying the real stars and the opportunities early on as well, and finding out how we nurture that. And I think it's bringing together that talent management, that career development with the deployment across the right projects. I think that's critical, and that's hard to do. You have to hit the right scale to do it. And I think you've got some views on the point at which a team size needs a real tool or a coordinator. Yes, I think I can't remember. Is it either
1 to 40? Yeah, 1 to 40.
Yeah.
1 to 40. It's just something that it was coached to me by a bunch of people. I was like, when do you bring in a dedicated resource manager that is not just a scheduler, but that is a strategic business partner? Because part of my career was in business partners, so finance business partners and legal business partners and HR business partners. Like I used to sell leadership development coaching for those functions. And if it was the CFO or the in-house general counsel or the in-house CIO, and I remember Steve Van Wyk, who was the CIO at ING Bank in the Netherlands, we used to have it as business school, and he used to bang on about the importance of this role as being a strategic business partner and what that meant. And a lot of it was about capacity and headcount and career pathing and all of these types of things. So no, I think it's really interesting. I think it's very challenging. I do think, linking back to something that you highlighted earlier, which is like that the environment now is less, hey, we're putting together a team, you're off to Newcastle, which I know is home for you, but you're off to Newcastle for 6 months for a project, see you later, to actually now people working on potentially 2, 3, 4 engagements, even in strategy consulting, right? Where it used to be predominantly full-time. Now, that's not to say that those engagements don't exist, of course, but that actually provides, in my view, an opportunity, because you can create more diversity for people, where it's like, look, I know you've done this engagement 6 times now, but I need you, but you're also going to be doing these other things, which are things that you find more interesting. So I think within this more fluid, we call it a high velocity services environment, but in this more fluid environment, do you feel that that does provide that opportunity for more diversity? And do you see where I'm coming from there?
I do. And I think this is where I work with a lot of clients who have that model. We don't, for most of our consulting work, we don't. We have you're on one project. Our typical length is probably 2 to 4 months for a project.
Right, okay.
But we tend to have single project staffing until what we call a senior manager level.
Got it.
So then those people are across other things. And that's partly because the nature of the projects that we're working on and the pace, the dedication that they need, it doesn't quite fit itself to
no, I could get that. I mean, it's intense growth work, isn't it? Like, yeah, okay, understood.
So, but the model, the model you're talking about, I've seen a lot of people using that, and particularly if we would move, say, in the world of marketing agencies, etc. That side of work where you're using your expertise across multiple accounts. You have different people who are keeping track of the overall project and engagement, but actually you have people coming on and off. And of course, that leads to more variety, more excitement, but it can also really stretch the boundaries on time management. So in terms of personal time management and work-life boundaries.
Yeah.
Because if you're on, especially as a junior, you don't have control over the waves of workload in a project. And if they all hit, if you've got 3 clients, 3 different project managers, and the peak workload hits on all of them at once, the person that gets squeezed is often the junior. And it's one of the reasons we try and avoid it as well. But we know that in certain sectors and certain parts of consulting and advisory work, that's what's required as well.
Awesome. Listen, man, I appreciate you coming on. I'm going to summarize a few of what I think are some very interesting points of view. I love going back to the, how I think your philosophy of how do we, and helping your clients, well, internally, but also helping your clients break the link between that headcount growth and revenue, right? So getting off that revenue treadmill and thinking differently about the service architecture that you provide and the consumption model for the customer, and delivering that IP in the way that they want it to be delivered, which I think is moving away from that, you scope, you build, there's some ROI, which is quite linear, to more of a, dare I say it, like this IP flywheel idea, right? And how you can deliver that. Beware the death of the billable hour.
Yeah.
Which I think is so true, because I think partly that's probably just the way that some people's ERP systems are still set up, right? But for me, what I think is interesting now is in the world of legal and accounting and professional services, which frankly speaking have moved tankers over the last 20 years. I actually think there's a lot more creativity culturally seeping into these industries where they're much more open to automation and innovation. And you highlighted this shift from like, you know, T&M based models or fixed price based models to value based models or outcomes based models. And actually, like that provides an opportunity for innovation for many, which is really interesting. But I think underlying that within this, what I'm going to call this monetization paradox, is you've got to have the right organizational muscle to deliver on that, both to do the diagnosis, to capture it and deliver it at scale in a way that's actually going to work so you don't get caught out contractually. So yeah, super interesting show, sir. Thank you. Did you enjoy it?
I certainly did. Thanks,
Jonathan. Awesome. All right. Thanks, man. Have a great day.
Okay. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.